It was a welcome comfort to wake up in my own bed. The house was plain, but safe and secure, which was more than I'd been used to on my journey here. The comforts of my home didn't extend too much past that, however. The few pumpkins I had remaining weren't going to get me very far. I had to find a way to produce more food. From my travels, I did have some seeds, and I knew that Nellie had a recipe for a hoe I could use to till the soil. The first step in building the planting bed was a little bit of landscaping, which wouldn't hurt the view from my window either. My home sat on the side of a stony plateau in the savannah. The slope slowed down construction somewhat, and I worked into the night. I found myself being very protective of my land, and I swiped away any monster I saw approach. The problem was the one I didn't see or hear coming. My home, it seems, also gave me a false sense of security. Expecting to wake in a far-flung forest, I was pleasantly surprised that when I opened my eyes, it was my room that greeted me. I hadn't expected to wake up in my new bed twice in one day, but I was grateful that I did. Again, I was stripped of all my belongings, with the exception of Nellie, although luckily I didn't have far to go this time. Apart from my pride, I didn't think I'd lost anything until I noticed that the residual Technicolor orbs contained just a fraction of the magic I'd gathered before. That stung. My complacency was gone, and I hurried inside after collecting my belongings. As a sort of gesture to myself that I wasn't a complete imbecile, I made a chest to separate things that needed to be cooked in the furnace. Quite rightly, that wasn't enough to abet my dignity, and I couldn't help but think that I'd been stupid. What's more, it did have a certain ring to it. The previous night's events had dampened my enthusiasm for building, and I decided to explore the local area to see if I could find food quicker than I could make it. I hadn't expected to find a small village, especially so close by. They were attempting to grow small amounts of wheat on the side of the great mountain that dominated the skyline in the area. Though hardly an elegant system, it did the job. Unfortunately, the villagers were not particularly hospitable, and I didn't have anything I could trade with them. I learnt that emeralds were the accepted currency in the region, and the villagers learnt that I didn't have any. I refrained from shearing the villagers' sheep, only in part because of the looming golem that patrolled the slopes of the hamlet. I couldn't refrain from ringing the bell. On returning to my abode, it did seem more like a bunker than a cosy home. Nellie and I flicked through her pages to see what, if anything, could liven the place up a little. I'd say it did the trick, sort of, and I'm sure there must be some use for this decorated pot. I doubted that the locals would want to come visiting, but if they did, I'd want them to feel more accepted than I had felt. At least the great mountain warmly greeted me each morning. That's when I started calling it Welcome Peak. Trinkets for the house wasn't the only thing I'd crafted the night before. I had the fantastic idea that a fancy new iron helmet and shield would help give the impression I was a serious adventurer next time I passed the village. My new shield put me on an even footing with the skeletons and even helped frustrate them into fighting each other. After clearing the local area, I was determined to get back on track with making a source of food. The grumpy villagers had one thing right. I'd need a well if I was going to farm anything in this dry place. I'd also used the iron to make a pair of buckets. My drive was only momentarily sidetracked when I found a cow and also found out how to milk it. I headed off, a new pair of buckets in hand. Aside from a few sheep that needed shearing, the journey was uninterrupted. As I scaled down the gravelly cliff to the sea, the clouds opened. I first collected the water I'd come for, but then noticed a blue rock under the surface. Nellie told me I could use the lapis lazuli to dye the growing pile of wool I was carrying around. Whilst I had the chance, I grabbed some copper, as well as stocking up on some coal and some iron ore. That, plus a few extra sheep encountered on the way back, made this a very productive day. I was interrupted as I worked, but kept focused. Once finished, the well matched the humble decor of the bunker. At least the slope on this occasion would come in handy later. The village's haphazard irrigation system had given me an idea. Over the following days, it was business as usual, and I continued to work on the farm, only now strictly in the daytime, unless I was underground where it didn't matter. I erected a farmhouse to store and cook the produce. Whilst digging out the basement, I came across an emerald. But after getting a feel for the gem, I didn't dare go at it with a stone pick, so I crafted an iron one. I was really going up in the world. Wait until those villagers see me now. After cooking up some smooth stone to refit the floor of the basement, Nellie's pages sprung to life once again, and this time with a recipe for some more attractive looking stone bricks. I had devised a bedtime routine where I would put away my excess things, replace broken tools, fill the furnace and stock up on food, if I had any. This helped me stay prepared as I came across the frequent but unwanted visitors. The distractions made it tricky to get the well and the farm's irrigation to both flow nicely into the basement of the farmhouse, but finally, after a few tests, it seemed to be functional. Not only that, but my first produce was ready, and just in time as I had eaten my last morsel a few days ago. I did notice that the pumpkin hadn't grown quite like I'd expected it to, and would have to make a little redesign. I celebrated the birth of the farm with a night of arts and crafts with Nellie. After a trio of skeletons successfully tested the integrity of my helmet and my lack of swordplay, I set about replanting the pumpkins, as well as enjoying the literal fruits of my labour. It seemed now I would only have to wait for more produce. I learned that a skill of farming was patience, which I was lacking. Instead, I set out on an evening walk. My curiosity got the better of my timekeeping and poor sense of direction. Unfortunately, I was lost. It was back to the hidey holes for me. I could have made a bed, but didn't want to risk losing the magic connection I had to my home. I had to wait out the night and try to dig through to the other side of the hill. After that task appeared to be a futile one, Nellie tried to distract me, and we aimlessly made a barrel and a composter. The distraction didn't last long, and irritated, I passed the time by pacing. When morning came, I was even more disorientated. Where was Welcome Peak? Whilst plodding along, I came across another village. This one much larger and with far better farming facilities that made me a little jealous. My tummy was starting to rumble again. There were actual farmers here that would have sold me some bread if only I had the emeralds. Leaving empty-handed, I started climbing local high spots to see if I could catch a glimpse of Welcome Peak. I didn't. But I did spot yet another village. It was comforting to know there were plenty of communities in the area, but on this occasion I didn't have the energy or the desire to visit them, even with my fancy shield and helm. That night, the hidey hole I nestled in was drab, and I longed for my eclectic bunker. I was struggling to even peruse Nellie's pages and hoped that she wouldn't be disappointed. The next day, the hunger got so bad I couldn't even sprint. With still no idea quite where I was, things started to look different. Had I seen that mountain before? I thought the jungle didn't go that far in that direction. I wonder what that cow would taste like. With myself nearing starvation, drastic measures had to be taken. Nourishment had reinvigorated me. Though nearing the end of the day, I stepped to and made my way up the nearest slope. And there it was. The sea stretched out in front of me, which meant that Welcome Peak was there too. As night descended, I started to hurry. That was a good decision, as I was waylaid a number of times. Through the running and some clattering, I spotted another lost soul. But now was not the time for heroics. Dipping and dodging, I made my way back home and relief washed over me. That night I slept very well, and in the morning entered the world more wizened and resilient. The creepers were generous enough to drop some gunpowder, and Nellie was very excited. What's more, I found the irrigation system worked just as planned. Even the heavens seemed to be on my side, and they poured nurturing rain over my budding crops. This was certainly a case of all's well that ends well. Yeah, so the creepers got me. I guess it happens to everyone, but definitely playing a little bit rusty. Unfortunately, when Fall got lost, I also lost a day of footage because I forgot to press record. So some of the scenes at the end are theatrical renditions of true events. And apologies. During some of the scenes there was some construction work going on, so I hope the audio's not too bad there. And I hope you enjoyed.